An editor at the Seattle Times just called the newspapers suing OpenAI a righteous battle, and then he really let it rip. He wrote that the big AI platforms are, and I'm quoting here, peddling more stolen goods than a seedy pawnshop. Okay, I love a good line. But let's sit with the pawn shop for a second, because the metaphor falls apart the moment you lean on it. A pawn shop moves one stolen watch to another buyer, and then the watch is gone. These models read the article once, and now you can hand a version of it to 400 million people a week forever. And the original is still sitting there right on your website. That's not a pawn shop. A pawn shop would be an upgrade. At least the pawnbroker only sells it once. So the anger is real, and honestly, it's kind of earned. But I want to slow everybody down here because there's a difference between a battle being righteous and a battle being winnable, and an even bigger difference between winnable and actually worth fighting. Here's the real case. On June 24th, a coalition of 35 publishers that run together nearly 400 local and regional newspapers filed suit against Microsoft and OpenAI in the Southern District of New York. And the lead plaintiff isn't Gannett, it isn't News Corp. It's Richner Communications, a family shop out of Garden City on Long Island. The folks who put out the Long Island Herald. Maybe not that big. The complaint is not Vibes either. It's three specific claims: direct copyright infringement, vicarious infringement, and, this is the sharp one, DMCA violations for stripping the copyright information off the articles before feeding them to the machine. They want statutory damages, and they want an injunction forcing these companies to remove their work from every model and every training set. That's hard to do, friends. Once it's in there, it's kind of like once you mix all the crayons and the mud and all that stuff together, it's kind of hard to get the colors out. And that third claim matters, so stay with me. Stripping copyright management information is not a vibes-based argument about whether information wants to be free. It's a statute. It has a dollar figure attached per violation. It is the most concrete, at least hand-wavy part. The least hand-wavy part of this entire fight. The papers have a real provable ground here, and I'm not going to pretend that they don't. But put your builder hat on with me, because this is the part almost nobody says out loud. Winning this case does not save local news. Let me say that again. Winning the case doesn't save local news. We have run this exact experiment before, friends. Receipts. Year 2000, the record label sued Napster. Righteous battle. Yes, it was a righteous battle, I suppose. Their music was being copied and given away. No argument there. I mean, I was a big torrenter back in the early 2000s. Good times. So they basically won. Napster died, and it did nothing. The music business kept falling for another decade. And you know what actually saved music? Not a verdict, Spotify, a license, a product people pay for every single month. The lawsuit shut one door, the business model opened a different one, and the label that survived weren't the ones that kept litigating. They were the ones who showed up to license. Newspapers are standing on the exact same spot the label stood on, because the lawsuit is aimed at the wrong wound. The thing actually killing local news isn't ChatGPT, it's a 20-year-old collapse of the ad model, when Google and Facebook ate the classifieds and never handed them back. AI is just the newest company walking through a door that was already wide open. You can win a judgment against the new guy and still bleed out from the original cut. Now, the lazy contrarian take here is copyright's dead, newspapers are dinosaurs, let them die, the market is spoken, right, data is free, blah, 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 blah. That take is relatively garbage, even though I'm pretty much libertarian and very close to that idea because I give all of my content out for free. Well, at least. A country without local reporting doesn't get freer. It gets dumber and angrier. And there's a mountain of research showing exactly that. So no, I am not in the let them die camp. But here's a sharper version of that criticism. A verdict is a check, and a check is a one-time event. Even the New York Times, right, the flagship, the one that actually has money, has burned more than $28 million fighting it since 2023. $28 million, that's a lot of money. And these 400 mom and pop papers are drafting in behind it. Say they win big. Statutory damages is a number that lands in a bank account once. It doesn't reopen a shuttered bureau. It doesn't rehire the reporter who used to sit through the school board meeting nobody else covered. You cannot run a newsroom on a settlement. And so here's my honest caveat, because of course I could be wrong. Maybe the damages number gets so terrifying that it drags OpenAI to the licensing table faster than any negotiation ever would. That is the real prize, and suing for leverage is a legitimate play, I'll give them that. But leverage is not a business, hoping a jury hands you a future. is not a plan. So what would I actually do if I ran one of those 400 papers? Well, and I ran this through my AI, yeah, I'd sue. I'd sue. But I'd be dead honest with myself that the lawsuit is a can opener, not a meal. The real move is to build the one thing these models physically cannot fake, verified on the ground local truth. What actually happened at the meeting, what the inspection report actually said. The stuff a model will hallucinate every single time because it has no substitute for a human who was not in the room. That is not an archive to be looted once. That's a live feed. And a live feed is something you'd license on a meter forever. The pawnshop framing loses because it treats your work as a stolen object. It's not an object, it's a spring. And you don't sue somebody for drinking from your spring. You build the pipe, and you put a meter on it. Righteous is the floor, it is not the finish. Win the case if you can, I suppose, but the paper still standing in 10 years is the one that stopped waiting on a verdict and started selling the water. You see, everyone says during these times, pickaxes and shovels. Well, in the age of AI, it's figuring out which AI services you can give away.